It's really Nairn South. We've been working on Nairn South for 6 years now. It came to us really through the Prince's Trust, and we're working with the developers and the architects, the threesome, Scotia, Barrett and Robertsons at that time and thereafter. And at the beginning really we got quite a decent design and layout and for the fields of Broadley Farm and Loughlin. And we managed to get the planners on side as well at that time in Highland Council, and things were developing quite well. It was a design which was sympathetic to the site. There weren't any tall buildings. There was nothing much more than 2-storey at that time. They were well designed and well spread out, and would have given Nairn quite a lot of really good housing for all abilities, all sort of financial abilities for rent and for buying. And since then really it's become totally different. The site has sort of shrunk quite a lot. There's much more packing in. The final design, which came to planning last week, is totally unsympathetic to the site. It's really almost like illiterate planning for architecture. Now, all of us, the community councils and individuals, have been feeding in extremely positive suggestions all the time. And I'm afraid our planners in Highland Council have been totally disregarding everything that we've actually put forward. Nothing really has happened. It's almost as if we've been wasting our time totally. And for this plan to come up and go before committee last week was really quite abysmal. It wasn't fitting for the site at all, because it's a highly scenic site. It's going to be seen by everybody from the south side. It's on the approach to Nairn. Its access is atrocious. The concept of all traffic coming into Nairn virtually, if they're coming shopping, if they're going to school, if they're going to hospital or the doctors or wherever, is going to be in Corder Road or Mill Road. There are just two options. It's not safe. You know, no parent would let their kids go to school unaided down any of these roads. And there's no alternative. The pinch point under the railway bridge is abysmal. And really there's no way around it. Traffic lights just will make it worse. It's going to end up with traffic snarled back right down to the High Street, near Pearl Street, around by Millbank School, up by Waverley Road, all around the schools. I don't know how on earth school kids are going to be picked up at the right time or even deposited at school for those that are coming in by car. And really for our team of 4 ward councillors who are really there to represent us. They're there in post, salaried with expenses, to represent the interests of everybody in Nairn. They're not and shouldn't be Inverness-based councillors that are representing Highland Council committees. They're there to speak up and convey everything which we have put to them. And after all, we do brief them extremely well. Anything which we put out to Highland Council goes to our ward councillors. So they all knew that all of us had objected, and we've all got these points which we cannot agree to. We're not against development. We've said that right from the beginning. And the site at Broadley and Loughlin is excellent for development of the right kind, but certainly not 3-storey houses adjacent to Fair Hall and on the roadside there. That's a non-starter. We've said that at the beginning, but our planning officers in Highland Council have totally disregarded it. And for them actually to come in with slides and a presentation supporting it, which more or less made out that hardly any of us had put in a formal objection, completely unreal out of this sort of, it's really atrocious that we're employing professional planners, and if that's the quality of their work, you know, we can't live with it. And we're certainly not going to accept it. And it has to stop now. We're not really going to go ahead now and work with Highland Council staff when they can't really do a professional job. It's reached that stage. And, you know, our 4 ward councillors, they were almost bullied into supporting this one by saying, well, if they didn't support it, the application would go to Edinburgh on appeal and be granted. Well, hell mended, because the Sandown one was well and truly kicked out, and it went to appeal, and it wasn't. The appeal was thrown out as well. So really, we're going to have a new beginning to planning and working with Highland Council. And I'm afraid Highland Council will have to look very carefully at the quality of their staff. One of the main points which is causing all sorts of problems is this ridiculous e-planning centre, which cannot cope with information coming in, or it's improperly put in, or the competency of staff who are actually running it, because it's a most devilish sort of email site to get any information off. It's always sort of changing slightly. You can't get into it easily. You can't find it properly. And of course, it's trying to handle far too much data, because these plans that are going into it, they're colossal pieces of work for data, for storage and recovery. So we have to look again at, the Highland Council will have to look again at a replanning system. So that's how we stand at present, and really I think we've all come together, we've all got the paperwork which we have submitted to Highland Council, which they haven't acknowledged or worked through. And really there's quite a lot of pressure now on Highland Council to change. And I really do hope that our 4 ward councillors, they're our councillors, they're there really to work with us and develop things. Anything more to say? Brian?
Well, Dick, it's dangerous if you give me the microphone now.
Oh!
But do I need to stand up? I'm sort of back to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm known for going on a bit. And so I'm going to try and be brief. And to that end, I've actually made some notes, and I'll try not to stray from the script. And essentially what I would say echoes largely, but not entirely, what Dick's just been saying. And I'm speaking as much for myself, not necessarily for Nairn West. But he's right. The decision last week poses a real challenge for us as community councils, whichever community council we're in for Nairn. And it also poses a bit of a challenge for our elected councillors. And we don't need to underestimate that. But I'm worried about a couple of aspects of the situation at the moment. I've been trying to look forward. We know the story so far. I'm worried about 2 aspects of it. One is that the present situation, an error in the report, and a retrial or a revisit to the planning committee, it's being sort of presented as a minor clerical administrative slip-up, and that the inadequacies of the report were just an oversight, and a procedural thing about which an apology will sort it out and it will be looked at the committee again. I don't think that's good enough.
No.
Yeah. I think the problems that have surfaced, that Dick has described, illustrate a pretty serious and fundamental failure of the local planning process. And to some extent they call in question the Highland Council planning apparatus. I actually think the Nairnshire got it right. They nailed it in their headlines. Council ignored community's views. Now, there's no doubt, as Dick was saying, about the strength and the consistency of the local objections that were put up over a period of about 2 years. And this wasn't NIMBYism. It wasn't, oh, we don't like development and we don't like houses. All the stuff that went in over a period of 2 years or more were detailed, serious, practical comments by people with expertise, people who've lived here all their lives, people who know the obstacles and the difficulties of access, of transport, of drainage, of sewage, all these nuts and bolts things, which Highland Council planners and other agencies ought to have taken on board. I think it's shameful that the council pretty much ignored all the points that we put to them. I looked at the report that was submitted by officials. I was astonished that none of the agencies, except Scottish Water. Scottish Water said, there may be capacity issues. How's that for an understatement, drainage experts? I was astounded that neither the council nor Transport Scotland addressed all these issues to do with Balblair Road, Corder Road, the underpass under the railway, the junction there, the capacity of Leopold Street, the congestion onto the A96. We've been seeing all these things in the last few weeks. Yet Highland Council planners blithely accepted at face value the transport report, which Scotia, the developers themselves, commissioned and paid for. And of course that said, there'll be no problem with transport and traffic and parking and so on. Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? They want to build the houses. The Gordon Sawmill thing was also an important issue. The key points about expansion of the sawmill, about noise, about safety, about access for timber trucks, all of that, they're not matters that can be dealt with by just tweaking the conditions on planning consent. So I think there's a serious issue here about the nature, the quality, the substance of the local objections we put forward. And I just don't think it's acceptable for the council to ignore all that and blithely pass this. I looked in some detail, but I'm not going to bore everybody with the point about how it is that council officials are now saying to everybody, to our own elected councillors and to us, and in public, oh, we can't do anything about that because it's all already laid down in the plans. It's all already in the Highland-wide plan. It's all already been brought forward through the A96 corridor planning framework. Basically what's happened is that the Highland Council planning process has stitched this up so that our elected councillors' hands are tied, so that our hands are tied, and everybody says, oh, there's nothing we can do about it because it's already all sorted in the plans. I don't think that's acceptable. It could be argued that, oh well, we missed a trick in not complaining or objecting 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when there was the discussion of the A96 corridor framework.
It shouldn't be allowed to happen, right?
No.
That's the point.
No, that's right. But the point is this, that it's not correct to say nobody raised these issues when the A96 corridor framework was being discussed. It's not correct to say these issues weren't raised, the Highland-wide development plans. Some of us, quite a lot of us, fed in these thoughts at those stages, and they were ignored at that stage. So I think it's important to remember that the planning process itself has let us down. Even by their own standards, Highland Council have failed. The A96 corridor framework, which was discussed, agreed and publicised way back in about 2006 or 2007, said in effect that these various developments in and around Nairn were directly linked with, and were actually kind of contingent upon, progress with things like the bypass. They drew the connection. They're now saying on themselves, oh well, it can go ahead even though we don't really have any firm decisions or funding or timetable for the delivery of the bypass. They also said that developments along the A96 corridor would be subject to a special developers protocol whereby the developers would have to contribute money to the delivery of things like the bypass and the roundabouts and the upgrading of main routes and so on. That protocol hasn't yet surfaced. hasn't yet been produced. So even by their own standard, Highland Council are blithely recommending approval of development projects when they haven't actually got the arrangements in place that they themselves were committed to organising. This puts all of us in a really tough position because the planning committee made a decision. I actually want to say, since Michael's sitting here, I applaud what Michael did at the planning committee. He stood up and spelled out quite clearly what the misgivings were in this town about Nairn South. And there were serious practical objections. I kind of share Colin's hope. Now, I confess, it seems a bit like wishful thinking. Well, perhaps it won't happen, or perhaps it won't happen terribly soon. So we've just got to live with it. I saw what Laurie said. He was pitching for a bit more money to pay for a bit more car parking in town, and worrying about whether or not the grass would be cut in and around these houses if they were eventually built. Well, with all due respect, I think that kind of slightly misses the point about whether the development should happen at all. I was going to say something about our provost. She's not here. And I think it would be a bit ungentlemanly.
Yeah.
So I won't say anything. But I think what I will say is that, speaking personally, I'm a bit disappointed at where we're at. It's not that there was a lack of evidence or a lack of information or a lack of expression of community views. I fear we've been somewhat stitched up. I'm depressed that a lot of us in this room, have put in a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of expertise, a lot of thought into the feasibility or otherwise of this. We haven't said, no, we don't want it ever at all. We've said, get it right, think about the issues, sort it. And we've been ignored. So I've been kind of thinking about, well, what's the way forward? What do we do now? I've already said, I don't think an apology, so what's it? There are those who say, oh, look what they're doing down in Dorset, you know, fracking protests, let's all go on the streets. It's a bit like painting the Regal. Now, that's great for a few days and we might catch a photo in the Nairn or a headline or two. But to be honest, we need a planning system which ensures that local planning and local decision making works properly without those kind of gestures. We do need a system which makes clear that local decisions on local development are decided primarily, not only, primarily by the local community.
Yeah.
We've had a traumatic experience with Sandown. It was traumatic for everybody. We're struggling to live with the consequences of some of the Sainsbury's fallout, traffic lights, roundabouts and all that. There are still unresolved issues over the planning and delivery of Loch Loy, you know, bridges over the railway, access routes at the far end, etc. They're all symptomatic of the fact that Highland Council's planning processes are not delivering what this town needs. And we're now facing the prospect in Nairn South of a development whose impact on the town, on its facilities, on its drains, on its roads, on its traffic, not to mention the sawmill and the neighbouring residents, I'll make all these other problems look like a bloody Sunday afternoon picnic. So we do have to make sure. I mean, I haven't got an answer, but I sat and thought about this most of the afternoon, as you can tell. We somehow have to make sure, via our councillors, directly to the council, or by whatever other means, and I really don't know what they are, that this foolish and inappropriate decision is rescinded. Thanks, Dick.
Thanks.
I told you I was going to hold the microphone. I've said my piece.
Thanks very much, Matt. I think, go ahead, and then, quick one, Greg.
I said at a World Forum about a year ago, and I'm going to say it again, I don't think this is incompetence on behalf of Highland Council.
It's deliberate.
Yeah. It is an act of war. They want to conquer and destroy Nairn as an independent community. It is enemy action. And somehow or other, we have to find a way of confronting that as enemy action. Because saying it's an incompetence, it isn't incompetence. It's the Highland officials doing what the higher Hingians want them to do. It's not incompetence, it's enemy action. I'm putting down a question for the debate between Fergus and Danny. I don't know if it'll make any blinking difference. But the question is, some Nairn residents consider that Highland Council is now completely beyond local democratic control. Would independence make Highland Council more or less accountable to the local residents? And I think that all three community councils should seriously consider their position and perhaps resign en masse, because I'll take no bloody notice of anything else.
Just two questions, Mr. Chairman.
Just sit.
I was concerned to read in the Nairnshire today that the Vice Chairman of the Southern Planning Committee, Councillor, and you know who that is, said it shows clearly that the process is transparent. And he said, I think, quoting verbatim, but he said, I don't think it's going to make any difference when we have the second meeting. And the second thing I'd want to bring to the committee's notice, I've got a letter here written from the Chief Planning Officer to the Chairman of Nairn River Council dated this day. And it says, the report did not, excuse me, I better put my reading glasses on. Thank you, Stephanie. I should have done this in advance. This is what the report did not reach the high standards which I expect from my team, and human error combined with the absence of key personnel in part contributed to this. And this is signed by Mr. Stuart Black, MA Honours, PhD. And if I was in his position, I'd be ashamed to write a letter making that statement. Earlier on it says, in fact, the Nairn River Council did object to the planning application, and this should have been clearly stated in the report. It was a very lengthy comment on the planning application, and I've heard the comment that the design was quite reasonable at one time, and some of the details that came in our report. One example I can remember now, we have an architect living on our estate where I live, and he quoted the 1950 building regulations, and he said there are houses planned on that estate, 3 bedrooms for 5 people, 1 lavatory per house. And that's not even as good as it was in 1950. I won't say any more, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Alistair?
Can I just update everybody and apologies for this. As many of you are aware, all the Nairnshire Community Councils have submitted a joint complaint to Steve Barnes as Chief Executive, and I've had 2 positive responses from him so far. I have copies of that, and thanks to Dick, I've got copies of all our individual and cumulative objections. So there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that from 2011 onwards, we have all been objecting, and everybody's saying the same thing. So to cut to the quick, I would like you all to afterwards come and take away these copies, otherwise it's an awful waste of some very good signpost work today. But the serious side of this is that this is a serious complaint, and it's about alleged deliberate misleading of the councillors by the Planning Department of Highland Council. And we're not saying this lightly, and we're not saying anything we haven't actually said to the planners themselves, individually and collectively for many years. But when a community like this, and all the 6 Nairn community councils have all signed up to this, and all agreed to this letter and what's in it, then we have a serious question as to what is local democracy, what is the role of the community councils, what's the role of the 4 councillors, and above all, what's in Nairn's best interest and what's in the common good, as I keep going on about Nairn. Tommy's got an audio recording of the meeting of the 3 community councils in the United Reformed Church with Brian Mackenzie and Malcolm MacLeod.
Now, most of us can remember what was said to us, especially if it was said an area where people were getting at us or annoyed. So any idea that they didn't know that River, Suburban and West had objected is cloud cuckoo land. And I think we really seriously have to ask for this whole process, and I'm only echoing what other people have said, we have to withdraw the Highland-wide local development plan. We have to say, look, it was pie in the sky, it was Malcolm's vision for doubling the population of Nairn. Economic reality has taken over, the forward projections in population have taken over. Let's get real, let's go back to local planning. The road stuff is just a disgrace. Joan spent all day today looking at it. I mean, the idea that Little Codrummy and Nico Codrummy is a proper road for access is just cloud cuckoo land. So, can you all take a copy? I think we have tonight to firmly support what all the community councils have already done in writing. And I think we really need to ask our 4 councillors very strongly and very clearly and very directly to find a way that allows them and Nairn to move back to some sort of democratic local control of all the decisions, but in particularly these planning decisions, which are, to my mind, completely out of line with any kind of common sense or Nairn's best interests. So please take copies, please read it, please see the wealth of information that's in there, and again, just to emphasise how real and how good these objections have been and how pragmatic and sensible. We're not saying don't develop, we're saying develop when you've got the infrastructure. And to echo what Dick was saying, that was exactly what the 96 framework started out to say. Let's do it properly. Let's learn from our mistakes. And many of you have heard me on this subject before, but if you look at the harbour, you look at the whole Loch Lloyd stuff, you look at Nairn, Inverness South, which is just massive slum in the making. We made some terrible mistakes, so please, please, please don't make them again in Nairn South. And above all, I'm looking forward to a very positive response. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for Steve Barron to say, like, enough's enough, let's draw a line in the sand and see how we're going to take this forward. And can I just thank all the chairs of all the individual community councils, looking particularly at Tommy and his wonderful filing system. But, well, just to make a very valid point, Tommy's filing system seems to be better than Highland Council's e-planning and everything else. He can pull stuff out from all over his house and find it. Dick's been very, very supportive. Rosemary's been great. Roger and Meg Robertson and the McBains have all been very, very supportive. So we've got a unanimous Nairn Community Council position. The complaint, and it's a serious complaint, is in from all of us. And I think it's a start, and I completely accept, Brian, what you're saying. I think we've got to move forward, we've got to have a solution. But to start off with, we need to decide that both the decision, the so-called documents that went with it, things like the absolute nonsense, as you've already covered, like transport assessment done for the developer. We had that nonsense at Sandown, where the same transport expert had written a report for Bear Scotland saying Nairn was congested and you couldn't get through it, and then wrote one for Devon saying there was no problem at all. I mean, so you get what you pay for. So please take away these documents. There's some real gems in it, and I defy envy to say that Highland Council didn't know that all of Nairn Shire was objecting. And remember, this was in the back of 3 joint community councils, and in that wonderful 8 community council meeting we had with Croy and Ardosseer. So, and all of these meetings objected, so there's something seriously and far wrong with their process if that didn't get recorded.
Alistair, could I ask a question? You may not want to answer it. What's your reading of whether Barron will draw a line?
I've had 2 very polite replies, like the first reply at 5:30 last night when I only sent it at 5:15, and a very nice reply from obviously the lady who leads their department this morning. If you want a personal opinion, and I have no reason for saying this, I would think this is a wonderful opportunity for him coming in fresh to dig himself out of some really serious cuddles, because I can't think MD is happy around where they are. Okay. And the important thing, and I can't emphasise this enough, if your original starting point is rubbish, then it's rubbish in, rubbish out. Yeah. And if Nairn's not going to double in the next, well, we're now into the year 3 or 4 of thousands of people who are meant to be here and they haven't come. But let's take the opportunity to take a step back. See Jimmy's there, and I've got a lot of respect for Jimmy, and I'm sure he won't want to do anything to upset the quality of life in Nairn. And I'm repeatedly talked to Charles Allenby, who says exactly the same thing. So we have people who want it to be a good development. We're saying let's have a good development, but you have to have a bypass, you have to sort the railway bridge, you have to sort the sewage, you have to sort the schools, you have to sort education. That's quite reasonable.
You remember that there Scotland or Transport Scotland says if it's a bypass, it is a bypass. There won't be slip roads and roundabouts on it. That's a link road.
I'm very aware of that, but that's just nonsense.
We're talking just now about the proposal for the 320 houses.
119.
But people have got to realise on the back of this shortly will be coming another application for another 260. So we're talking close to 600 houses. And this two combined, I mean, it's a massive development. And my own understanding, the railway bridge as it is now, you're talking at least 600 cars a day coming under that railway bridge. Impossible. The way it is. And the way the sewage in the town, it's going to be an absolute disaster.
I strongly recommend that everybody takes away a copy. The way, unfortunately, this has been done, I thought it would all be nice, but it's in separate piles. But starting with Nairn River's objection to Richard Hartland in 2011, and every time I see Richard Hartland's name, it reminds me of the first meeting we went to when he came, when he said, look, planning in Highland is a shambles. That's a good idea. We have to do something about it, and he was quite open about it, and what he did about it was leave, which I don't think actually helped, and there's some really serious questions to be asked.
He was the NRCG's enemy number one.
When people genuinely feel, I've never known the whole of Nairnshire so united. I've never been able, one or two recent issues that have upset people, but this has really got them all going. So for goodness sake, don't back off. Don't not take this seriously, and starting with this, and starting with our own councillors, please go to Highland Council, please go to Steve Barn, say, look, they've had enough. It's not good enough just to change this slightly. I don't see how you can change it. If everybody in there is objecting, you have to write it in a certain way. You can't just say, oh, well, we're taking our objections and ignore them. And I think people are just fed up with their objections being ignored. And Tommy, in his wisdom, gave me Allenby's, Muir Evans' objection to the Highland-wide Local Development Plan in 2010, which must have cost several £1,000s. It's a wonderful, very professional document, but just ignored. So it's not just us that have been objecting. There are serious, real problems around planning in this particular bit of Nairnshire, and we need to sort it.
Yeah, well, thanks, Alistair. I think we must thank Alistair, because he's worked tirelessly over the weekend getting this all together and sending it out to everybody. And we are sending it out to our MSPs as well.
They've all got
copies.
Us and have
Yeah.
and have our MP.
Yeah. And I've been speaking to some of them, and I've also been writing to Nicola Sturgeon, because she's more than happy as well to support us and come alongside people with a lot of the issues of locality planning and allotments, for instance.
You want me to bore you all night in locality planning?
Yes. Right, yeah.
Can I just make two or three very quick points? Firstly, to pick up briefly on what Alistair said about Allenby and the Muir-Smith-Evans, which is the rival group. I glossed over when I commented the business of the sequence of plans and master plans and regional plans and the rest of it. We all know what they are. One of the things I didn't say, but which is actually quite important to remember, is that after the Highland Wide Plan was done, the government reporter who had to approve the Highland Wide Plan had to grapple with some complaints that were made. That regional plan shouldn't have had all the nitty-gritty detail about exactly what should happen in Nairn South or Delmings or wherever. And there was a lot of argument about that. And that led to the Scottish government reporter saying, well, because he could see there were two rival bids for this Nairn South, he said, well, what the council needs to do is draw up a master plan for that site. A kind of set of rules that any developer of Nairn South would have to play by. And that was what we all consulted and discussed. But the interesting point was and is that the master plan which the Highland Council officials drew up was not a step and a spit away from the vision which Scotia had drawn up. And Allenby's people, who were highly paid Edinburgh consultants, spotted that and complained. The problem is, and we made comments as well about that master plan, making all the same points about roads and bridges and drains and the rest of it, Highland Council ignored it all. It wasn't surprising then that the officials were able to say, oh well, this application last week complies with the master plan. Of course it does, because Highland Council simply copied and retitled the Scotia design. I'm being very simplistic there, but there's a lot of substance in that because it was Allenby's people who made that point.
The whole thing disappeared off the radar for a year.
Yeah. There's two other points, very, very quickly, just to pick up on John's point about the bypass. There's still an argument to be had about whether there are going to be slip roads and roundabouts. But the key point is this. If and when a bypass comes into being, it'll shift a hell of a lot of traffic out of the centre of Nairn. And it will ease greatly the movement of the people who are actually here. So whether or not there's going to be an access for Nairn South in or off a new bypass is not the whole point. Once the bypass is there, it'll take a hell of a lot of heavy through traffic away from the town, which will then make it easier to manage Wellington Road and Leopold Street and the rest. Finally, quick practical point on housing. Tommy was absolutely right. This particular application talks about starting with 319 houses. Its eventual grand plan, phase whatever it is 520. And that's only Scotia. Allenby's plan, if it comes forward and if there's a debate about that, envisages another, how many? 260? Okay. Now remember Alistair was saying a minute ago that there were grand plans 5, 6, 7 years ago by Highland Council to massively expand the A96 corridor and to virtually double the population of Nairn and all of that. We mustn't forget, and somebody's done the arithmetic and I didn't make a note of the numbers, that Highland Council Planning and Development and the Highland Council have already approved several hundred houses at Delnies, several hundred houses more on top of what's already been built out of Lochloy. In principle, although who knows what's going to happen there is still planning consent or an expectation of houses being built at Whiteness, some houses, whatever. There's a whole new town going to be built at Torna Grange. So it's not as if this little area east of Inverness is strapped for possible housing. The bottom line on this one, as Alistair said, is that the development has been proposed and regrettably now agreed for Nairn South. It's wrongly timed, wrongly designed, wrongly configured, and not needed immediately to meet Nairn's needs. And it's way above the capacity for Nairn's infrastructure to cope.
Okay.
Enough said.
Right, time's moving on.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
earlier I had permission with some of the speakers tonight to film them. I just wondered if there's anybody who objects to any of the content appearing on the internet in a video, for those to see that weren't here tonight. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah. This is a public forum.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, next says.
And to take Brian's point, and take the point that Roger's making very clearly to me on behalf of all them, we need to know what's going to happen next.
Yes.
And when I say we, all the locality planning stuff, all hands on deck, everything I'm reading just now is all about partnership working, and that's the only way we're going to survive the financial problems we're going into in the future. So we need a very, very clear steer from our 4 councillors and from Highland Council as to where we are going next.
Yes.
One of the things that worries me is how much time and effort many, many people in this room have put into all this planning, It's caused an enormous amount of hostility and ill feeling towards the council and some of their officers. And if nothing's ever going to happen, then it's totally unnecessary. Let's just get into some common sense.
Yep.
Looking at John there, he's been fed up with planning for as long as I've been in Nairn Suburban. We have to take it seriously because it affects ordinary people. But there are many, many other things that many of us would much prefer to put a lot of time and effort into, which are positive and will actually lead to a positive outcome.
Yep, good points. Thanks. So that will be, we're looking for a really sort of quite answers quite quickly.
Is the 18th of September soon enough to discuss that? When's the revised planning meeting?
Same day.
Same day?
Same day. Yeah.
Same day. We're only
Yeah.
going to be discussing what we want
Well,
to.
well, it might not happen.
Is that good?
Is it not, is that not, are we not a bit late then?
We'll give them a time to
Or
sort of take it in, you know, to adjust it.
Well, I think I should say a few words here. I don't wish to cop out, but I don't want to say too much, but I certainly don't want to prejudice my ability to talk on the 18th. So, but what I can do is reiterate what I said, which I'm not with public record, of how much I absolutely agree with everybody for very good reasons. We know the reasons why we don't want this development there at this stage in the game pre the bypass. Brian hit the nail on the head. We are ill served at the moment for local democracy. I would suggest that if it had gone back to the district council, that the district council would have refused this application. Possibly it's just speculation, but I would think that that's what would have happened. But when it's on a Highland-wide basis on the south part, north part, we are in a minority, so it's very, very difficult. So I don't really want to say much more other than I always have had the feeling, I did say at the time that if you see the webcast, it was a joint community council objection to the process. I would actually stand up for Highland Council and say in this omission, I think it was actually an act of omission rather than commission, but that is not really the main point. What I'm trying to get across here is, I think, how do we get local democracy more of a voice here? How do we influence things? And that's where the trick is. We know what we wish to achieve, or what the locals wish to achieve. It's just, how do we actually achieve it? So,
Thanks, Michael. So it's difficult getting a meeting place actually, Alan, for September's a very busy month, and that's really why the 18th is. I think it's quite suitable because we'll either know if this meeting has gone ahead, and at that time what the result is. Okay.
For the benefit of everybody, the complaint has also asked the Chief Executive to give us other avenues to explore.
Yes.
So at the present moment, this is asking him.
Yeah.
But there are several other layers we could go through. And I'd have thought it would be very, very unwise until this has been sorted out to bash on. I mean,
And have a meeting.
yeah, well,
Do you
to
think
bring
we
it
should
to a
delay it?
meeting, I think we should have leave the meeting on the 18th
Yeah.
and just let them decide.
I think what Alice is saying
Yeah.
is that if the Highland Council are going to address the issues that have been raised in this correspondence
Yeah.
and other comment seriously, then they might be wise to defer the retrial
Yeah.
and the revisiting of the planning discussion a bit further away than the 18th of September.
I think that would be the best option.
Yeah, I mean, that may be something that
Mhm.
perhaps formally or informally we can kind of say, even if it's only by way of the councillors going back from this meeting and saying, formally or perhaps informally, look, there's a hornet's nest here. You know, the community is seriously vexed, as illustrated by the correspondence. There will be a joint meeting scheduled for the 18th to kind of pull these together and hopefully to chart a constructive way forward, because that's what we still want.
Yep.
And it might be possible, perhaps, for Highland Council to say, well, you know, given that there are other things in play, the Chief Executive's got to address all these points, you know, it might be prudent, if it's possible, for them to rethink the schedule of revisiting the planning.
Okay. because we're proposing to have another meeting in mid-October of the 8 community councils, so really it's, you know, by staging them like that, it's going to be a complete update. Okay,